welcome to the Resilient Mental State Podcast. I'm Kyle Shepard, husband, father, and resilience instructor of over 10 years. Join me as I sit down with writers, independent thinkers, and extraordinary individuals to discuss their unique wisdom through the lens of resilience. Resilience is the ability to effectively manage and recover from stress. It is essential to endure and grow from life's inevitable adversities. Resilience is a skill that can be trained.
Sam Alaimo, you technically were my first guest on this podcast. We did that last fall, and I've gotten to know you pretty well over that time in a variety of ways. And I very intentionally have made you my first return guest, and it's a pretty simple reason. You have become my favorite living writer. And it's a big statement because I tend to love a lot of writers, and it's very true. But your ability to weave together stories from pre-state populations and compare them to either post-civilization stories in extreme environments, to include your own when you were a Navy SEAL, and consider the modern human condition, particularly modern forms of adversity. So you can either ask the simple question, what then? Which you, of course, pay homage to your favorite philosopher, Stoic philosopher Epictetus, or just ask people, what are you going to do with this information? And I love what your writing does in that it doesn't give answers, it gives questions. And every time I read your fucking posts, and I've gone back and read all of them since you started on Substack several years ago, I wrestle with all of them. I've reread several. I have them some saved so I can go back to them, certain themes that resonate with me. And just your story of how you've gotten here is inspirational. Brother, it is good to have you back, and I'm stoked to talk to you again.
Oh, rock on, man. I appreciate it.
Hell yeah. Your Substack is titled What Then? But you've been either developing or have had this theme that you're bringing more to the forefront now. And it's going to be the title of a book that you're producing one day and you've been putting in a lot of effort on over time, called Primal Hardship. I'm curious, is that an evolving theme that's come from your work on What Then? Or is that something that you've had and you've been wrestling with for a while and are bringing to the forefront now?
It's been a long process. The idea for it started when I transitioned out of the military, which was a radical mix-up in, like, you can call it ways of being. So I was a SEAL. My tours were to the tribal lands of Afghanistan. So I had the combination of what you can consider to be a pre-state unit, which would be like a tight-knit combat unit in the teams, in a pre-state environment. Where we were in Afghanistan, there was no electricity, no plumbing, no roads. There were a few vehicles, no medical services, no airports, no light switches, like you name it. It is absolutely pre-state. And it opened my eyes to an entirely different way of seeing the world, of seeing existence. And I went from, my last tour was a 9-month tour to that area, a very kinetic combat deployment. And 30 days later, I was in a classroom in Columbia University in Manhattan with nobody I knew. So it was a complete radical pivot from a super tight-knit group, trained together for years, fought together, to being an absolute individual with my identity abolished in Manhattan, getting my master's. And it almost broke me because I realized how alive I was, how engaged I was in the former environment, and then how empty and struggling I was in the latter environment. And it was the strangest thing, because at first it was incredible. It was safe. I could walk down the street, and I still remember, I think I wrote about this once. I still remember walking down the street and wondering why everybody looked so miserable and pissed off, like New York City, like, just get the fuck out of my way, don't look at me. And I'm like, do you not realize you're not about to get blown up? Like how incredible it is. You go walk into a coffee shop and buy a coffee and a muffin, and no one's going to shoot you. And then over time, I got it. I started to atrophy. I started to lose that absolute appreciation and gratitude for every second I had been given. And I too became sort of like drifting down the sidewalk, just getting from point A to point B. I have a thing to do. I have a timeline. This is inconvenient. And then it snowballed. And it woke me up. All right, there's different ways of being. What was different about that environment compared to this one? And it started me off on this idea of coming up with what you're calling primal hardship. I haven't figured out the exact terminology I want yet. It's going to be crucial which words I pick, but um, I realized that um, I started digging into pre-state peoples, like you said, and I studied that realm hard. I got into evolutionary theory, evolutionary psychology. I read every ethnography I could get my hands on from old bookstores, old old dissertations that have not yet to be published, and it took me years to realize that the true differential isn't between the pre-state people and the present people. It's not ancient, modern, because I lived it. It can't be ancient and it can't be pre-state. I'm not pre-state. And I realized it wasn't bound by time or space. It was an existential posture. So I'm like, all right, people must have written about existentialism. What is that? And I started to read Sartre, started to read Heidegger, started to read Dostoevsky, started to read Nietzsche. I'm like, oh wow, these guys thought about it from a different angle. I didn't think about it from before. There's a school of thought on this, but they never connected that to what it must have been like before the state in a combat environment. Probably because a lot of them just didn't know. I had a unique experience. And then that started to evolve. All right, there's an existential posture I'm trying to hone in on here that nobody seems to have defined before. How many more are there? What do they look like? How do you access them? And that has become the obsessive study of mine since the idea first dawned on me in 2015.
And it's fun to listen to you talk about it in the same way that we talk about some of your, my own favorite philosophers, thinkers, and writers, because words are powerful. And you read Eric Hoffer's words, and to use your own words when you recommended the book True Believer, that each sentence hits like a hammer. And that is absolutely true. And how powerful those words are, like they are in your writing, you can see the passion behind it. But then when you hear the person talk about it, like the video you shared of Hoffer, you see like this hunger to explore more, to experience more in different realms. And then, the life that he chose to live, despite he could have had any opportunity he wanted to in that time with the politicians and the people he was consulting, but he chose to live out of trains and to walk around and to work on random jobs just to experience life in all the different domains. And what I see not only in your writing, but getting to talk to you is you're exploring those experiences in your life. Despite continued success in the professional realm, you're exploring these different experiences that you can take on to maintain or maybe even figure out more. What is that thing that we can leverage, not based on time, but from finding, for lack of a better word, purpose in this life and fulfillment in ways to actually make it feel meaningful to you?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, even the Hoffer video, I was surprised when we watched that. I know it's kind of off topic, but for those who don't know, Eric Hoffer, they call him the longshoreman philosopher. The theory is that he was an illegal immigrant, probably from Germany. He had a Bavarian accent. He may have been a Jew escaping from Hitler's Germany in the 30s. Nobody knows. He didn't tell anybody before he died. Like, he kept that secret to his grave. We'll probably never know who he was or where he came from. But he was poor. He was homeless. He was a migratory worker in California. He picked peas, every low scale job you could imagine. And he was a devotee, he said, of books and brothels. So like, he would go up and down California and he had a card to every local library in California, and he would just study and think and read. And then he started writing. And he came up with this concept of a true believer. He wrote about it in his book called The True Believer. That was his first like breakout book. Everything after that was a riff on that theme. Typically a thinker like that will have one core theme and then their whole life's dedicated to exploring it from every angle. That's what he did. And he had a very intense aphoristic style. He couldn't figure out why aphorisms weren't more popular. So he was an aphorist. Nietzsche was an aphorist. And typically when someone's like that, they're really good writers, they're really good thinkers, and they suck at speaking. But I wanted to know, what did he look like? What did he sound like? And I found this old interview series from the 1960s. It's a 12-part series, 30 minutes apiece, black and white. I think it was 1962. And once he got on the screen, I'm like, I'm looking at a legitimate one in a 10 million human being. The kind of philosopher like Aristotle or Epictetus, maybe someone like even Shakespeare, like, what were they like in reality as human beings? Eric Hoffer lived up to it. You can feel the intensity from that screen 60 years after the fact of a man who is 100% original and alive and in love with ideas. I could rewatch those videos 100 times because I'm like, I wish to God I could have sat across from that man for 2 hours and just let him talk. Like, have a soliloquy, have at it. Don't stop talking. Just keep going. Because I want to feel that energy. I love the love of ideas and people like that, who is more concerned with the beauty and originality and elegance of an idea than he was with the fame. That is a rare individual, especially today where everything's about fame. It's about influence. That was just out of this world. I'm so happy I found it.
I've rewatched it several times myself, and just on top of his passion for thinking and reading and sharing ideas, just a sweetheart of a human being too. And you read his work, like you said, you're interested in seeing how he sounds and what he looks like. And we've done that with other writers on Substack that we've gotten to know better, just wanting to figure out like what do you like beyond the page. And it's typically been very pleasantly surprised with some of our favorite writers like Tim W. Just an amazing individual, as sweet as you can be, as down to earth and real as you can be, even though his writing will make you fucking uncomfortable. Just like Eric Hoffer, that writing will make you uncomfortable, but then you talk to him and he makes you feel like you're at home, even when you're just watching him secondhand, just full of love, full of life, full of passion, but also full of curiosity in the human condition and some of the disparities that we see in the extremes, which is also what you explore, particularly when it comes to the extremes of the human experience. And while that is uncomfortable, there's a lot to be learned there when you apply it to the human condition at scale.
Yeah, I wonder too. Like when I would look at him when I read some of his later work, when he started being more reflective on what he was like as a young man. Yeah, a lot of the guys and gals, men and women who like I guess would be thought of as the greatest thinkers. I think a lot of them are also like the greatest feelers, which meant they were also the greatest sufferers. I'm reading a great biography on Nietzsche right now by Walter Kaufman. He was like the man who did the majority of the translations on his work, corrected his reputation because he was used by the Nazis as their sort of basis for this sort of like racist Darwinism. And he corrected the record by going back and doing his work, reading every single note Nietzsche ever made. And the man was born of suffering. His best work was when he was absolutely, utterly alone and isolated and vomiting and couldn't keep his bowels in, absolutely sick. And he poured that into creation. And when I read some of Hoffer's later work, when he was talking about his childhood, he tried to commit suicide when he was a kid because and I was stunned when I read it too, because I'm like, oh, this guy was old in that, but he might have been 70 in the videos I was watching. And he had the charisma and the energy of a 22-year-old, but he wanted to kill himself when he was a kid. And I think a lot of these people, these really nice, deep, thoughtful writers, they're the ones who suffer the most. And they took it and they turned it into something beautiful. It's beautiful suffering. And that's really one of the themes I love to dig into in my own writing in Primal Hardship, is this obsession with comfort and making everything safe. This what we call progress. It's getting us further and further away from the conditions that make us realize how exceptional of a gift it is that we exist in the first place. There is much value to be had in suffering. And some of these writers, when they really get into it, when they really get raw, like Tim W. does, like a lot of thinkers do today, that's crucial. That's crucial because it's reminding us of what it truly is to be a human, and not just some fabricated of goal of I need a certain profession, I have to have a certain amount of money, I have to do X, Y, and Z before I die. It's not a check. It's not a checkbox. There's much more here than just that.
Yeah, that word suffering, like many words and the connotations that we tie to them and attach to them, I still experience it too. When I talk about intentional stress, I'll get comments like, that sounds like a lot of suffering. And it's just funny how we put these words into boxes to get them away. And like the lack of comfort is somehow a bad thing. And as you often say in your posts, I mean, you're not saying do away with all the modern convenience that we have, technology and everything else. Of course, you're co-founder of a company that uses software, or AI and software to make the world a safer place. We're talking right now on the computer. We have phones. Technology in this abundance is a benefit. Of course, our ancestors would have liked to have some of the conveniences that we have, but the absence of suffering is not thriving. And really reframing some of these words and how you can leverage them to make your life better. Because you try to avoid suffering, even the most mundane, the most mild things will cause it then, because the less you have, then the more anything else will feel. Like a very weird comparison that I'm thinking of, because you reminded me of it earlier. You had a great post a while ago about a watermelon. So when you were deployed, you didn't have a lot of the modern convenience that we have and access to different types of food. And you had this beautifully written, very Tim W-esque, where he could write about, like, it, I mean, eating cereal, and he would make it sound beautiful. But you did the same thing when it came to eating a watermelon in the middle of a desert. And you were just describing the taste, the feel, the stars in the sky, the middle of the night, and how silent it was. And just maybe the most, like, the most gratifying meal that you ever had was a simple watermelon that we take for granted, get in the supermarket now and throw away, maybe eat half of. But the absence of that made it so significant. So when you go on the counter, absence of all suffering or trying to avoid it, the minor conveniences of life can start to feel like too much. So that dichotomy is a very interesting thing to me that you explore so well in your writing. And again, you get to the extremes of suffering to either reflect on them or maybe start cultivating experiences in a safe way yourself. It really resonates.
Yeah, and then your last part there is crucial. How do you get that back in a safe way while still enjoying all the modern stuff? I love having a gym and not having to be super physical for a living. I love having my barrel sauna, which you're familiar with. I like, having a heater in the house and a fireplace, and I love books. I don't want to do away with any of that stuff. So how do you do it within the mind? And how do you do it from an existential posture and viewpoint of the world? And there's a lot of ways to tap into that and access that. And I'm trying to, part of what I'm doing with What Then is the essays are experimental. So as I'm working on the book, the essays are ways to just riff on the ideas that are most striking that might lead somewhere. And the best point about Substack is that if they don't, fuck it. Like, it's still a good essay. It's still thoughtful. It's still fun, and people still apparently get value out of it, which is awesome. And the readers I've had are just unbelievably intelligent. And what the essay I'm in the middle of it right now. It's an essay on perspective. It's actually an essay I started writing probably 10 years ago. And I've changed radically as a writer and thinker since then. And I read it and I'm like, okay, this was born of an absolute knuckle dragger brain, but it was profound because it was born of a knuckle dragger brain. So I kept the idea the same, and now I'm writing it with my new writing skill, the hard-earned skill. And it's turning out pretty good. And it's perspective. So instead of it being comparative of like, hey, here's a hunter-gatherer, here's someone who's civilized, this is starting off that there is an inherent flaw in the human experience, in the experience of all living, breathing things. And I started off with a story about penguins. The explorer Scott, when he was in the Antarctic, with these these Englishmen were obsessed, like, it's truly curious human beings about like wildlife, what it is to be. And they were in Antarctica and they saw these penguins and like, all right, these little guys they're curious. They look like little guys dressed up in nice suits. They have a little white front, the black in the back. And what's strange though is there's no other land animal there. There's no tigers there to eat the penguins. There's no elephants. There's nothing hunting them on land. They are supreme on land, and they're completely defenseless, flightless birds. That's interesting. If they get in the water, they're gonna have a hard time with an orca. But if they're on land, they're safe. And they noticed that when they were down there were the dog sled teams. These dogs are super aggressive animals. The penguins didn't know what a dog was. So these penguins, who are completely flightless, completely defenseless, would look at the dog and be like, hey, what are you fucking doing here? And they would get up to the dogs, and the Englishman would be like, hey, don't do that, penguin, because the penguins weren't afraid of dogs or humans. And the penguins would start squawking at the dogs like, hey, back up, be quiet. And the dogs are staked to the ground, just growling and drooling to get at this penguin. And Scott was just watching this encounter where the penguin just like waddled up to the dog like he was going to kick the dog's ass. And then within a fraction of a second, once it got within that zone, it was a blood splatter. It was done. And it was like, okay, that's perspective. This penguin didn't know that there was a land animal that could kill it. It had no conception whatsoever. And now zoom out to a different species, go to humans. You had a civilization in Mesopotamia that was thousands of years advanced to what the Aztecs were thousands of years later. No wonder then that the West was able to become more technologically advanced and come to the American continent. the people in the American continent were at the pinnacle of their game. Look at the Aztecs, look at the Incas, and they were the pinnacle. They thought from a comparative viewpoint, they were as advanced as a human could be. Little did they know that across the seas was someone who was going to sail across that big expanse of water with invisible microbes that would extinguish their entire civilization. So like we are inherently limited by what we see with our own two eyes because we refuse to take our own imagination seriously. So this is bridging the gap, and what I love, which is like, what is this inherent limit of the human that seems to constrain itself based on what it can see in its environment? But it's something of a paradox because those same people were capable of coming up with mythologies and histories and grand ideas and narratives of incredible things that could happen, but they didn't take it seriously. They didn't train for it and couldn't have conceived of this entire force coming across the ocean. So how do you bridge that gap? And that's where the creativity comes in. I think creativity is going to be one of the, well, like it's a major focus of mine right now, is not creativity like, hey, can you write a song? It's creativity. Can you re-envision what the world can be, which requires you first to understand what it is and basically transcend your environment. And I couldn't think of a better way to start off than with penguins and Mesopotamians, but it's kind of a cool limitation we have to work with.
Man, I feel like I just got to read it with your explanation of it. That's going to be a fascinating one, like on perspective. And that
Yeah.
is a unique but powerful perspective again. And the vulnerabilities we have due to our own ignorance and unwillingness to think outside the box. Obviously, like, again, we're lucky to have what we have, but we got to what we have because people worked their ass off every day to survive and focus on the mission of some of the most basic things that we have I mean, I could order everything that I need to survive from this phone while I talk to you right now, which was basically what all waking hours that the tribes focused on fulfilling. And breaking down your environment, it, like, you talk about being creative for what the current environment is giving us or what the future environment might. I mean, your most recent post gives a lot of very legitimate possibilities, and you talk about uncomfortable. The lights could turn off tomorrow. You could get sick individually, or we all could again tomorrow. So whether it be pandemic or at an individual level, things can change in an instant. And like, how you respond to that will be demonstration of your character or the preparation that you have. And these are all legitimate possibilities that are happening around the world right now. So what skills do you have, unrelated to technology, unrelated to your comfort, to be able to not only thrive, but maybe even just survive? And the irony in some of our ancestors or current pre-state populations, like you talked about in Afghanistan, or Michael Easter writes on like the Hazda tribes quite well, and like these areas, the blue zones or whatever, where you have higher levels of fulfillment or happiness, however you measure that, comes down to simplified living and having an oriented mission within a group of people that you trust and find credible. And it's interesting because a lot of the writers that you've mentioned and talk about, like in Hoffer, they intentionally withdraw from society and conveniences to experience life at a basic level. And while that might be perceptually uncomfortable for many, boy, can you find a lot of opportunities in it if you're willing to step outside that comfort zone.
Yeah, I wonder about that one a lot. Uh, some of my best thinking has been when I was suffering the most. It kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier. And I think, going back, you just mentioned Hoffer. I get the impression he was suffering so much from something that he wouldn't let go, which is one of the reasons why he never allowed himself to attain a position of power. And I see something similar in a lot of the thinkers throughout history, even right now with Nietzsche, because it's fresh on my mind from the book. Um, it felt like they were disconnecting to increase their suffering because the suffering increased their creative mindset, their capacity to step outside of the current culture, the current society, the norms, the conventions, and to literally try to get a first principles understanding of what a human being is, what drives it, and what is its purpose from the ground up, from no influence, or rather from building on influences and being comparative and then being innovative on top of that comparison. And that's a hard life. And that's not something everyone can do. If it were, most of them were childless, we wouldn't be here. So like there has to be a balance. And so like look at Tolkien, like you could have incredible thinkers who build families. The question is going to be, what are the trade-offs of both paths? There's something romantic about the man who decides to be homeless his whole life and is an absolute brilliant original philosopher creating original works, but that's not necessarily a happy life. There's got to be a middle ground where you can still, like, it's almost like an Aristotelian ideal. How do you become a fully well-rounded human being with your potential in each domain maxed out without having to become a hermit, a monk? I don't really answer that question. It's fun to think about because these people are, when they get into their little caves, they crawl out of them with books that will last for as long as our species does, and that they're life changing. I wouldn't trade them for the world. But the ideas were born out of an exceptional amount of suffering.
And we need those anomalies and those extreme examples so you can apply it to more, like you said, nuanced, balanced examples where you're not leaning the entire other way, ignorant, oblivious to anything, just trying to take advantage of comfort. But how can you dabble? And to your point, I'll stay curious the rest of my life on what that balance is, what those domains are, and what are most productive to me. And I'm sure that answer is going to be different in some capacity for everybody. So it requires your own self exploration. There is no, this is how you exactly get to thriving and fulfillment. Absolutely not. We're too variable. But what that is, it's definitely not the absence of suffering. And if you want to use a different word because that word makes you uncomfortable, go be it. But we were mentioning safety before, and that is very important when you try to start making yourself uncomfortable. And you don't want to be physically unsafe, in my opinion. Of course, you can be and could and should be, as you know, I like to write about physically uncomfortable, but not unsafe to where you're risking injury or death. But my goodness, you should not be preserving your psychological safety. And that's a term we hear quite a bit these days. Like, and I don't even know what that means other than staying perceptually comfortable in the first place. And how do you grow if you're feeling psychologically safe? So whether it's reading, your writing, or the other writers that we're talking about, pursuing areas that make you uncomfortable on purpose, at first a manageable level, and then expand that shit over time. And you might realize you get to places that now when you get after it, or do something, it would have been impossible a couple years ago had you not started to build that capacity. But if you're unwilling to step outside your comfort zone, good luck. I mean, it's going to be very hard to change if you're unwilling to change in the first place.
Yeah, the physical is interesting. There's a lot of ways you could break that down, whichever rabbit hole you want to go down. But the physical is interesting. I mean, physical training is eye opening. Competition, something a little bit of risk. Learning how to like do bouldering. There's a million different things you could do, and then there's um the philosophical realm is interesting. Like a lot of the philosophers, a lot of the ancients, um, they always come back to the concept of death, and that is a fascinating one. And it depends on who you talk to and what position they're in life, what their recent experiences were. It could be like really depressing to talk about death, or it could even just be like just some vague abstraction because they're not familiar with death, and that seems to be the more familiar one. When you look at the primal world, the pre-state world, death was the animating factor. Death was when you go to the bathroom in the morning, you could die. It could be a panther, it could be an enemy with a spear. You could die on your hunt because you become the prey because of some large, deadly cat with big fangs is hunting you down. And that kept life interesting. Same thing in a combat zone. It kept you appreciating your watermelon. It kept you appreciating the fact that you were alive right now when you might not be. And it gave you a concrete enemy to train for. And that concrete enemy, it kept you anchored. I got another essay coming about this one, like the value of having an enemy with a really cool torture story from the Iroquois. It's gonna be super uncomfortable, but it's really good stuff. Um, and I think that bringing that back, obviously not by being hunted, which is an experience all its own, but bringing it back just as a practice is extraordinarily valuable. Because I do think that when you're not exposed to the idea that you could literally not exist, like not just the words not exist, you could literally stop existing tomorrow. When that becomes a true realization in your head, it doesn't need to be depressing, but it does need to be awakening. And what it does is it basically slows time and it reframes priorities. And when you read the words of cancer survivors, they they all of a sudden look at life as a gift, and they all of a sudden say, wow, why am I forcing this profession or this relationship or this X, Y, or Z when I've just been given another lease at life? This is a brand new start. Why would I ever do that? They take pleasure in the smallest things instead of trying to reach for the greatest things. And all of a sudden, their expectations are reduced back down to reality or just above it, not unobtainable. And it's a beautiful thing what this relationship with death can do. And that's one of the probably one of the major pillars of any philosophical system is human beings' relationship to death. I think that's a good, safe way to try to tap into this suffering you're talking about that doesn't involve the risk of atrial fibrillation because you did too much in the cold plunge, but is really good and healthy for the mind and the system in which you live.
I completely agree with you, but funny story. I write intentional stress challenges, and my first time doing that, I came up with kind of 10 general ones, and I had like 4 or 5 physical, and then 4 or 5 that were more mental, social, spiritual, if you will. And so I had fear exposure as one, and then right after that, I intentionally put contemplating death. And this was an article that I wrote up and put out for a few publications. And all but one of those publications who did publish that article had me take out contemplating death. They thought it was too controversial, too uncomfortable, and maybe dangerous for certain readers because maybe they would contemplate in the wrong way and then start contemplating actually taking their own life or pursuing it on purpose, which I didn't
Yeah.
really understand the connection that was being made there. But just like the mention of death can make people feel uncomfortable, and that discomfort can then lead to something dangerous. I didn't push it. It was whatever. I published it all on Substack and then continue to write about it in different ways. But it's interesting because I couldn't agree with you more that reflecting on what is possible hopefully bring more power to what you do have control over now, while you still are conscious, while you still are alive. And not only your own death, but I take it a step further. I have 4 kids. You may recall I've lost 3 children. So lost one before Evelyn. We talked about that in the last podcast, and then I lost 2 more recently, which was very challenging. And technically, on paper, the most recent one was the hardest because we had her named second trimester. After a loss, we thought we had a rainbow baby girl again, just like my oldest. But that wasn't meant to be, and there is no explanation for it. It was a less than point like 2% chance. Who knows? And blink of an eye, she was gone, and it led to my daughter Lucy, and I'm extremely grateful for that. And I talked to my wife regularly about like, I mean, I don't know, like the first loss that we had, it had meaning. It made me into a better husband and man, and prepared to kind of meet the unknowns of life more resiliently, if you will. And my wife and I almost separated, but got back together, and it was beneficial for us. And that loss continued to make me think about the power of life. And the most recent one, harder to swallow. I'm grateful for Lucy, but don't know the lessons other than just another reminder, which life will always give you adversity outside your control. Another reminder that don't get comfortable. I mean, you think you went through your hard stuff, more things are coming in the future. And that reflection, that power. So when I'm struggling with my mini me that I joke with you and our buddy Marshall quite a bit about in our group chat, who drives me fucking nuts. A great way to ground me in my head is like, hey, you could lose this tomorrow, and is this really that big of a deal? And that's healthy for me. That really orients me to, man, how can I take advantage of this opportunity now to work through it and not be miserable inside because he's not listening to me? Go figure. He's fucking 4. Of course, he's not listening to me. He's pressing every boundary. Contemplating death for sure can make you want to live life more to the fullest.
Yeah. How do you, I mean, do you consciously, you're surrounded by it, but do you consciously try to implement that?
I do. I don't know if I don't have like a morning ritual or like a night routine, but I have like these little things that I draw upon when I find myself like I'm big on like self-awareness, like recognizing when my mood sucks or when my breathing is just disrupted. I'm pretty conscious of my breath, so I'm having a hard time nasal breathing or maintaining the rhythm that I'm subconsciously aware to. I know there's something that needs attention, and based on what the issue is, I'm I've gotten better. Not good. I still fuck up every day, but I've gotten better at hey, you're feeling some way right now. How do we reverse that shit? Get a little bit more rational. And when it is with other people, particularly people I care most about in this world that I'm upset with, that's one of those things that I've come to a few times. Like, hey, You lose them tomorrow. You're going to die on this hill? Probably not. I haven't said yes to that yet. And it's a reframe, a strong one, but a reframe with others that helps me quite a bit. It's funny. We were talking about engagement on Substack and just how thoughtful some of your readers are. I thought of this. Your comments on your post are just as good sometimes as your posts themselves because, again, of how thoughtful people are. But again, we mentioned him already. Tim W. mentioned recently, which cracked you up, and of course it did him too because he's okay with dark humor. But the story of his son when he got the text or the call from his wife about his son having a nosebleed when he was younger, and immediately it came to his head because, of course, the line of work that he works in, and he deals with that kind of shit all the time, death and darkness. He's already visualizing, like, what I can't remember how he put it, like what he's going to say at his funeral and what he's going to do after he passes, how he's going to show up for his wife, and just these extreme examples of what's possible with his son having a nosebleed. And like, I think he bumped his nose and it was no big deal, but just like he went there. But that also, that reflection can add a lot of power to the now. Hopefully it's not something that you take yourself for other people out of rationality and into anxiety. But I get that. When my kids get hurt, that's another orientation for me that I think real quickly, like, hey, reminder, that could have been a lot worse. You could lose them. Make it count now.
That was good. It was good. He said he picked out the pallbearers already, like within a fraction of a second. Yeah, that's like a healthy form of catastrophizing. Instead of just assuming nothing's going to happen, that's actually going down the road. That's the negative visualization. That's making sure that you appreciate every moment you have, like with your boy or your girl or your dog or your plant or whatever it is you love most in the world. It's a good way to be.
I like how you put that, a healthy form of catastrophizing, because we often talk about in the stress management program, catastrophizing being a negative thinking strategy, but you could really say this to all of them. Like, they're all opportunities to reflect a little bit more deeply and consider what you're doing. And yeah, there's power in that healthy form of catastrophizing. I'm gonna remember that. That's good. Another form of, I was just thinking about just the theme of primal hardship. And obviously, in your career, military career as a Navy SEAL, you guys are known for being able to endure some tough environmental conditions, whether that's being really cold, really wet, underslept, really hungry. And most people attribute that to buds. But of course, buds is just a fraction of what you will deal with in all the next phases that you go through as you get to your teams, the pre-deployment workups, and then, of course, most importantly, the deployments themselves, like you being in Afghanistan for 9 months, living with pre-state tribes in a pre-state world in modern times. You get very used to these conditions that we take for granted most often. I'm curious, since transitioning out of the military, do you explore some of those elements in life on purpose to keep deriving maybe some of the lessons that they offer to you, despite having the conveniences that we do?
I do. In the beginning, I did it because it was sort of a psychological need. Now it's both a psychological and a physical need. So I developed some autoimmune problems on my last tour to Afghanistan. And the only way I can keep my body under control is to keep it on the edge. It's sort of a weird paradoxical relationship. So in the beginning, when it started, from buds, from combat, everything else, it was always your mind over your matter, mind over your body. Well, I learned very quickly and very hard that that's not always the case. Your body might go off on a track of its own and the mind cannot control it any longer. And that's what autoimmunity is, when your immune system attacks itself. It became sort of a test. Like, one of my other favorite thinkers is Ernst Younger, and he described the body as sort of like little members of a military, and your brain is the command center. And it was great because that was the model I was operating off of, and just intuitively, okay, body, I'm not going to give you drugs and medicine. I don't take pills. I don't take drugs, like prescribed drugs like that. I'll do psychedelics all day long, but like, I'm not going to take an immunosuppressant and drool on myself the rest of my life. So I'm like, we're either going to develop a new relationship or done. I'll check out. Like, I'm not going to live as a slave of my body. And that became a series of tests. And I realized that if I strategically I realized I went too hard in the beginning. There has to be an extremely difficult challenge for the body, for my body, for autoimmunity to keep it in check. If it's too much, it becomes even more destructive. It becomes the cycle becomes even worse, more destructive to itself. If it's too little, then the autoimmunity also gets out of control because it thinks it has free reign to do whatever it wants. So I insert, um, certain types of lifting, maximal, maybe submaximal, has a really good effect, anti-inflammatory effect. Breathing, love breathing, whether it's zone 2 or zone 5, pushing it that way. Heat sauna was one of the best things I've done. It's like a nice dry barrel sauna every day. Cold, turns out that was a bit too hard. It was too hard on the body. When your body's already stressed out of its own accord, to add the additional cold of the additional stress of wet cold over every square inch of your body at 32 degrees, that ended up being too much for my body. So I had to pull back from that one after a nice little medical scare on that one. But yeah, across the world, probably the most two of the most impactful things I did to kind of maintain that the physical test, that physical closeness with that ancestral environment, was an autoimmune diet was game changing for me. As hard as that was, cutting out anything that can cause an immune reaction, and for me that was almost everything. I ate probably about 12 foods, the same 12 foods for about 3 years until I figured out what was going on with my body. That's not safe to do for the average person, but for me, I actually liked it. I liked the test. I liked the discipline, and my body liked it because I got a chance to relax a little bit. My diet is now probably I could do dozens of foods now. It becomes heavenly after a while. After that, being able to eat a strawberry again became like a divine event. It was a life-changing, momentous event to eat a cold strawberry. So there's a tremendous amount of gratitude there. But then water fasting was a good one. So that one I have to do infrequently because it is such a trip on the body. But the first one I did a 7-day water fast. So nothing but water for 7 days. And that was the biggest sledgehammer I could have ever taken to my body and my immune system. And waking up on day 5, it was a miracle. Every muscle, every tissue, every cell, everything felt completely uninflamed, like I was 12 years old. My body was mobile. It was recovered. I was sleeping well. My vision was clear. My skin was soft. And that was just the ultimate pressure test and middle finger to my body ever. And it was probably the clearest, like it blasted everything out of my body. When I went into it, I was always a steady, like maybe 175, 176. I went from like 175, 176 to 157, and I didn't have much to lose. And I never got that weight back. I'm like at a steady 165. Never got that weight back, but I'm stronger than I was then. So what did I lose? Was that a lifetime of junk, accumulated chemicals from the food I was eating, exposures overseas? What was it? And why was it there in the first place? Did it contribute to the ill health? I don't know. But there was like a turning point physically in my life ever since that one big water fast. And then maintaining that with a diet. We literally are what we eat. It reframed my whole outlook on like what it means to be here. And if you eat fast food, if you eat sugar, that's what your body is. If you eat fruit, if you eat meat, if you eat fat, that's what your body's going to be. It's going to impact the way you think and the way you live, the way you feel. But there were a lot of adventures I went through in this whole process, but those are probably the most impactful.
So I remember you told me about the 7-day water fast. When was that?
2018.
2018. So about 7 years ago, a little bit, 7+ years ago. Do you still explore intermittent or various forms of prolonged fasting? Probably not as long as 7 days, if I recall, but do you do anything like that intentionally?
It's been a while. I did a couple 5 days after that, but I haven't done probably 3 or 4 years. I haven't done that. I do just 2 meals a day, and it doesn't matter when I eat them as long as it's 2 and not more than 2. If it's 2 or 1, I'm good to go. That seems to be best for my body. What's a shame is that this diet is not like I don't eat so that I can meet my physical training requirements anymore. I have to adjust my physical training requirements to what I can eat. I just can't support the sort of physicality I once did, which is probably a good thing because it holds me back. I'm not going to go too hard and balls to the wall. But it's enough to like get me where I need to be now, which is clarity of mind so I can think, so I can function at the the highest cognitive level I can and just sustain the physical. Like my life has totally changed. It was just about how hard physically can you go, just get some, all that raw stuff. That's the way of the past now. Now it's a entirely different focus in life.
Well, I'm probably lucky that I got to meet you after that because I've worked out with you a few times. I've done contrast therapy with you, and you took it easy on me, of course. But it's funny to think that that's just Sam taking it light and reorienting himself. He just talked to our friend Kip Perez the other day. Listened to that yesterday, and I mean, it's wild. You get hit with these curveballs of life, whether it's your autoimmune thing, the more recent stuff that happened in the cold exposure, and I know you liked the cold and how you thought we talked about that in the first podcast last year, just the delayed gratification of stepping out of that ice water. But if it's not serving you and your needs, or you're just doing it to suffer unnecessarily so, and it's actually counterproductive for your life, then what the fuck are you doing? So like there is productive suffering and there's just needless, unnecessary toughness applied to something that's not going to be beneficial for you. And maybe what was working for you before, I love the mindset of mind over matter for sure, but I really appreciate your story that can only go so far to a certain point. It may get you through the hardest times in life, and you want that orientation. But eventually, you got to listen to your body a little bit too if it's not serving you, and you're starting to break down. The fact that you've been able to shift your perspective, because you're still a young man, and you better be a young man because we're similar in age, and I like to think of myself as a young man. And the fact that you can shift what you're focusing on for what serves you, whether that's trying the fast and realizing this is the balance that I need to get after the way that I want to now. I like that. So it's not just doing it to do it. You did it for a reason, to learn, to explore yourself and figure out what it is that you need to do to manage these new things that you're balancing in life.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So we talked about this a little bit before we hopped on live. So I was recently competitively selected to go to a workshop out in the West Coast, and it's for the military, looking at a few different matters that could influence some processes, at least for the Navy, maybe elsewhere. But two of the concepts that we're focusing on are quality of life. So enhancing quality of life for service members, as well as improving workforce retention. I definitely have my own thoughts on it, but I know you've dabbled with these concepts in different ways and talked about them on podcasts, and at least in related ways. I'm curious, we should probably break them up. There is overlap, but what do you think about just the question of how do you improve someone else's quality of life?
I don't even know where to begin. So how are you defining quality of life?
I'm very eager to learn how it's being defined by some of the leaders that are running the conference. But for me, for me, quality of life is an opinion, in my humble opinion. And I don't know if you can necessarily provide thriving or enhance quality of life to somebody else. So it's one that I'm wrestling with right now. I can definitely be more charitable in that interpretation, but quality of life would just be, I guess, living perceptually well for the systems that you're operating in. Yeah.
That's tough. I mean, it's hyper individualized. What's quality for me is not going to be what's quality for you or anybody else. I think it comes down to what are your goals? Like in some sense, the health stuff is fortunate because took a lot of it took a lot of opportunity away. I used to be like a slave to all the things I could be doing. I would always be thinking about the opportunity cost. What else could I be doing right now that would be higher return on investment? What else could I be doing that would be more aggressive? What would get me further and advance me further? It was always thinking about the next thing. I'm sort of in a position where quality of life to me is being more grounded now, not being lost in all the million things I could be doing because there's not that many things I could be doing. Like it is, and it feels good. It's hard to explain that. It was a reframe because I was diabolically aggressive and ambitious, and I just wanted to keep going, keep crushing, keep excelling, and I was doing that so much that I was never actually like content. I was never actually sinking my teeth fully into the thing. I was aware, of course, trying to be as excellent as I could, but I miss so many opportunity. Quality of life now is really like digging my feet in, trying to be as absolutely here and now as I can, whatever the task happens to be professionally, in terms of relationship, in terms of the creativity, the writing, the thinking. So, I mean, quality of life, whatever it is you value most, as long as that's truly the thing you value, not the thing you're escaping towards or running from. And then just making sure you're actually attacking that thing with your whole heart, mind, and soul, um, and then building your life around it. I mean, I think what one of the values of like crucibles or tests or a psychedelic journey or whatever it is, it's a thing that allows you to reframe your whole life, from a totally different angle, to get out of it for a little bit and then look at it as if a third person's looking at your life and say, who designed it? What was the reason to design it? Is it something I actually agree to? Do I genuinely want that? And then starting from there and saying, okay, what would a quality of life be? How can I structure this thing so I can make sure my goal, is fully integrated with who I am, what I want my life to be, the people around me, etc. It's probably the best thing I can come up with off the cuff.
And that was phenomenal. And you hit on a few topics that I've been considering quite a bit. But before I get there, you mentioned psychedelics again, and you have one of the best pieces I've ever read. I've read several books, listened to several podcasts, and read several articles on psychedelics. But the nuance that you used when you wrote about psychedelic experiences for solving life's ailments and consideration of the tool rather than the end all be, it was just so well done. Like you do. You didn't come with this one size fits all solution. You came with consideration of the why behind the pursuit. And you just explored that really well in your response too for quality of life, because it is going to be individualized. There is no one size fits all for that either. And I'm a big fan of core values, understanding what they are for you. But you really hit home. I talked to Michael Osterlink the other day for a podcast. I'll be coming out soon too. So psychotherapist for over 30 years, bunch of stuff in the resilience industry. He was at master coach at Seal Fit for 10 years with Mark Divine, and has done some other cool stuff. But yeah, he does stuff with core values, but he does exactly what you did there that I have not done that much in the past. I'm going to do from now on. So that's great. You know, your top 6 core values out of 100 that are offered, or whatever ones you want to come up with. That's great that you can rank order them. But before you start considering how your actions align with the values that you supposedly have, and if there are gaps, start considering that. Why do you have those values in the first place? Where do they come from? Are they inherited? Are they part of a belief system that you think you should have so you can be part of that group or that tribe that you're trying to be a part of? Like really wrestling with, okay, I've gotten here, but why are they here in the first place? And I do think that is an opportunity. Now, of course, in the military, mission comes first, as it should. And missions vary based on what your job is in the military. So whether that is, of course, deployments away from home, pre-deployment workups, longer days, 24 more hour duty, extended working out, you name it, the mission can ask more of you at times than others when it comes to like quantity of time. But quality within the quantity, and determining what that is for you, that's an individual question. And deriving ways so those questions can be asked. And then you started off saying goals. So I work primarily right now in my job with civilians. And one thing I'm helping kind of bring back and reinstitute for a lot of our civilians with support from various individuals is IDPs, or individual development plans. And so just goals not given to you by the organizations, but goals derived from you in alignment with, or just for your own personal growth. How are you trying to get better, and how can we as leaders help facilitate that? Knowing that person and their why. So then, okay, if this is important to you, let's see how you get after there, particularly if we're giving you resources to do so. I believe the military is actually really good at providing opportunities to enhance quality of life, whether that is Military One Source, Fleet and Family Support Center, the MWR, and the gyms that we have access to. Like, there's just so many resources and programs out there, but how they're leveraged and what you do and what's entailed in your life, that's going to be so variable. Knowing that person in the way that you described, that was very helpful in the ways that you described that, brother. I appreciate you.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what the program's like and then what you've turned it into. It's going to be good.
Absolutely. How about retention? What are your thoughts on I definitely have some here too, but improving workforce retention. So keeping people around, making them want to come to work and stay over time.
Um, that's it's also difficult because you're dealing with a lot of intangibles. It doesn't just come down to money. It doesn't just come down to advancement or promotions or titles. There's an entire culture aspect. Um, I think when you look at like Zero Eyes, the company I co-founded with other other SEALs and one non-SEAL who was more tech savvy than we were, um, the goal is to basically have the culture feel as if it's a mixture of a SEAL platoon and a venture capital backed company. So that is a unique balance that not I think a lot of people can't function in. It takes a special kind of person to do it because it's so antithetical to what you would find in a corporation or in a standard business. It is very, very egalitarian, and it's hard to find people who can operate in an egalitarian system who don't then allow their egos to get a hold of them, who don't try to stovepipe information, who don't try to step on other people, who don't try to create little cabals. It takes a person who is more mission focused rather than self focused. And that's probably a reason why like 70% of the company is former military. It has that sort of, I'm here for the good of the company, and the good of the company is then going to be good for me. And it's probably easy because the mission is to stop mass shootings. It's not like you're trying to sell a new app. Like you're actually, you can get behind the mission and truly throw yourself into it. So when it comes down to, I guess, retention, it always helps to get down to the mission and the why. And if you frame the why appropriately, why are we here? Why does this exist? Why are we communicating with each other on a daily basis? It's for this mission. It's for a noble mission. And when you compare uh, a Slack message that appears to be rude, or what appears to be a mean look, or someone had a bad day and said the wrong thing because they were just stressed out, kids are all over the place, they're just having a bad day. And then you say, okay, understood. These things happen. Why are we here? And I think when you do that enough, the problems generally take care of themselves. Uh, and then as the organization gets bigger, then the next question is, how do you make sure it stays that way? Like when you surpass 50 employees and you get to 250 employees, that's when the mid-level management comes in there. So you got to make sure that the leaders who are now dealing with the boots on the ground every day fit that culture and get it and can not only see it and select it in hiring, but then cultivate it and nourish it with the employee. And it's been fun to see that progression from like, five guys in a basement to a company like ours. Um, but the retention has been, we've been blessed with retention. And I have to assume it's for those intangibles, for the why, and for the culture.
And you come from small teams in the SEALs, and that small team leadership component that you alluded to, and how you can scale that mentality to the different tiers of leadership so you can keep embodying that why rather than it just being some motto at the top and everybody rolls their eyes underneath and keeps going par for the course. Yeah, explaining that why behind it, getting people on the same page. And I do see a lot of emphasis on leadership development, leadership programs in my respective realms that I operate in. But now we're talking about the military at scale, so many different specialties, so many different areas. And of course, the Navy, I work in naval aviation. There's obviously land and sea as well, and everything in between. So at scale, I love the concepts, and I do think there's opportunities also. In various ways of how we promote people and really help people, whether it's on paper or through performance and some combination of them. I know things are being explored there. I'm curious because you and I not only have talked about your own transition out of the military, just opportunities when it comes to transition. So, like when you know someone is leaving or you know someone's going to do one tour, um, I mean, those people are just as important than the ones that we are trying to retain, but opportunities for the transitions out and making that a productive experience so we keep advocates who served on the same side of having a good experience both during and after and in between.
Your question is how do you handle those transitions with people who leave?
Yeah, like facilitating productive transitions to the civilian sector as an opportunity to actually retain more by making the transition out as beneficial as possible.
Oh, you're talking about hiring people from the military into the civilian world.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's changed a lot. So like when I got out, there weren't programs to help like SEALs, for instance, transition from the military to the civilian world. It was, hey, welcome back from 9 months of hardcore combat. Good luck. And that's not a good recipe. And around the time, it was normal for employers to say, when you hire a veteran, you'll get a good year, and then they're going to leave you because they had no idea what they were getting into. It was a culture shock. They didn't know what they want to do. They left with big expectations of what it must be like in the big civilian world where things are done right for a change, and all that stuff is becomes smoke. And then what happened shortly after that era, and they're exceptional at it now, is the offboarding programs to give you an exposure to sales, marketing, operations, strategy, tech development, etc. So that way people can see it and say, "I got it. I know what like my personal affinity is to." They'll get exposure to company sizes. So maybe it'd be a tech startup with 20 employees. Maybe it'll be IBM with however many employees they have, like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Um, that is just like that is a game changer. You'll get people coming out of the military now who can speak a civilian language. When I went to business school, I didn't know what equity was. Like it was, it was like a joke. Um, and so like we're hiring people straight from the military right now, straight from the SEAL teams, who literally, while they're still technically active duty, are selling our solution, speaking the lingo, speaking well, whether it's to a superintendent of a small school out in the middle of Arkansas or the CEO of a major banking institution, and they're crushing it. And it's exceptional to see. So the military has that figured out. I don't know if it's true for every community, but what I've seen from the soft community in particular, that they've done an exceptionally well job. Like I am blown away. Um, like had I been given that chance, I probably wouldn't have done it anyway. I had to figure it out the hard way, but like the guys coming from it are doing really good work. So the military has it right. You could probably see it right now in real time, but it was cool to see them crack that nut.
I love to hear it. Another change we're seeing right now in the military, which I'm a big fan of, is standards and reapplying some standards, whether that's in the physical realm for the fitness assessment or just other standards that we need to hold ourselves to in a variety of domains. And there's benefits. So our friend John Daly writes quite a bit on standards in his Substacks, Walking Point and Ruck the Fuck Up. But having standards for yourself, and I mean, even failing to meet those standards because you set yourself with high standards, I believe there's benefit to that when it comes to not only professional Sam Alaimo and how you utilize that in Zero Eyes, but also just in your own life. What kind of standards do you like to hold yourself to or try to encourage in your areas of influence?
Oh yeah. Um, I like to break everything down to tasks. Um, it gets me closer back to that environment of like a combat unit where everything you did was going to impact the success of the mission and life or death, and breaking everything down to like a sacred task. And in the day prior, I'll get ready. What do I want to accomplish the next day? What will enable me to achieve my like goals of wanting to be here now, present, but also long term, and trying to merge the two to be harmonized. Um, so I think it's just literally whiteboard in the main room, the office, the study, whatever you call it, and then breaking the day down into chunks, literally an empty square, and you don't stop until that square is checked, and you put your heart, mind, and soul into every single task, whether it was to read for 60 minutes, get a work project done in 3.5 hours, employee one-on-ones, physical training, you name it. It's as unique as each individual human being, but literally segmenting it down by task and trying to cut out the noise, shut the fucking phone off, not look at 10 different tabs at the same time, and be fully engaged in the task. That in itself is a good test, but that's how I try to do it personally.
Hell yeah. And is this something that you do each morning to schedule out your day like that, or do you do it a larger scale?
I got to do it the night prior. I can't do it the week prior because too many things change. I can't do it the same day because then
Yeah.
I'm like, if I try to do it the same day, I like lose my it's all over the place. And then I'm trying to like figure out what I want to get done today. And when I'm like calm the night before, that's when I get everything set on the whiteboard. And then I prime my mind with it before I go to sleep. And then the magic happens like when I'm no longer consciously thinking. And it's amazing. If I love working through like a good problem, like I the perspective essay we talked about, it's not done. I have an idea, like I have the concrete examples, but now I'm turning on what does it mean, even like right now while we're talking, why is that the case? What's the solution for this failure of perspective in the human condition? And I'll basically set the whiteboard up, have the things done before I go to bed, say, okay, brain, this is what you're going to think about tonight while you're asleep. And it's amazing how much will come together like that moment right when you're waking up, where you're still in dream mode, but your eyes are awake and seeing the room about you. And all of a sudden, when you're not trying, everything comes together. So there's a yellow notepad and a pen next to the bed so that like I can make full utilization of that, write it down before my brain obliterates it. And then I can't tell you how many times that's been like the answer, the crux to the essays I've written, to the problems at work. I didn't do that for the longest time. I thought it was like voodoo artistry. I thought it was like Jungian dream interpretation. It's not. This is some real stuff. And I started doing it a couple of years ago. It has been a game changer.
Another game changer that you gifted me at the end of our first podcast was I bring a waterproof notepad and pen into the sauna now, because those thoughts come to me quite a bit in there. And we finish our conversation with that, and you're like, bro, waterproof notepad and pen. So sauna has that now. So when I sit in there for however long, take advantage there, because yeah, when you're not focusing on the problem for a while, you just table that shit. It's amazing what the muse can do and bring stuff to you. Like you said, it's not voodoo. And it's wild how the mind and the soul interact and connect to make that. And I think about standards and what can keep us from missing them. And something I wrestle with quite a bit too is just, I mean, we have urges as human beings. We need to eat at some point. We need to drink water. We have the urge to procreate. That's how we have spread our seed, literally and figuratively, to create a large numbers of people over the world. So we have these urges, but at what point do we lose control of those urges, or do they become vices that we mismanage and they end up managing us? I'm curious, one, do you have any vices yourself these days? You're a very disciplined man. You are exactly how you sound on a podcast and write on Substack. Again, I've gotten to hang out with you. You are the real deal. I'm curious if you have any vices, but also how you think about managing urges in the modern world, because our abundance really encourages us to mismanage them.
It's probably the third time I've done this conversation, but define for me vice.
Vice would be, so like some people's vices would be soda. So like I have this, what I know to be an unproductive habit, but I write it off as just, this is one of my vices. Or, um, have you ever seen the movie Kingpin? It's a
Oh yeah,
bowling
man. Bowling.
comedy.
It's awesome.
Oh, it's one of my favorite comedies of all time. My wife hates it. I think it's fucking hilarious. Woody Harrelson and what's his name?
Bill
My
Murray.
favorite, Bill Murray. Bill Murray. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Big Earn. I still have that shit when I go bowling. That's my name. But anyway, there's a priest in the movie. Pretty girl walks by, taps her on the ass. He's like, and so he's a priest bowling competitor. He's like, what can I say? I got no, sorry. He's getting a drink. He's like, I thought you didn't drink. He's like, I gotta have a vice. Then a pretty girl walks by, taps her on the butt. He's like, okay, two vices. But he admitted drinking is a vice and that women are a vice. But basically, unproductive habits that we're okay with. Do you have any?
I I don't know, because again, I don't have the leeway I used to. Like my vices before this health stuff started in 2013 would have been, I used to love alcohol. I used to love like different types of food, like typical junk food. I used to love the lime Tostito chips. I used to literally down an entire bag of the 2 jars of salsa. Like that with like 4 Guinnesses was heaven on earth for me. And I would do it almost every day because I was burning the calories back then. That was a vice.
Yeah.
I can't do that anymore. It's a vice to me now to have like a little extra sweet potato. It's a vice to have like another tablespoon of black pure cacao, which most people can't even stomach. So it's a different mode. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of vices. I mean, we don't even watch TV, so I can't say like watching TV is a vice. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I don't really have anything that like I don't do anything that I don't want to do. Let's put it that way. I can't think anything I do is a vice that I shouldn't be doing.
And that's a great way that you put that, is that there's nothing that you do that you couldn't go without doing quite comfortably. And that's a great way to frame what vices are. Like, if I were to ask you to stop using social media for a month, and that made you extremely uncomfortable, or you actually said, I'm not doing that, you got yourself a vice, or maybe something worse based on what that vice is, how long you've been using it, if you're abusing it, and we can start talking about addiction or whatever it might be. And when I give that intentional stress challenges, and I talk about vice fasting, I've often found myself just saying device fasting, because these fucking things that we have these days now, our phones, our technology, really are vices for most people. And I give people some wild challenges, and what they're most resistant to is when I challenge them to go without social media for a month. And you would think like, no, I'd much rather do your cold plunge challenge and do intermittent fasting for 3 days straight. Or I'm sorry, but prolonged water fasting for 3 days straight, rather than when they're not in good shape or anything, rather than go without social media when we have these conversations. But it's wild. Um, and of course, these things have the algorithms and the ability to feed into our urges and the dopamine system, whatever. But managing urges for me, when you talk about primal hardship, is such an opportunity. It takes reflection first. What are my vices? What are the areas of opportunity that I can actually go without, be physically safe, but psychologically quite uncomfortable? Not surprised you don't have any significant ones, but I think it's an opportunity for many to reflect on and say, hey, how can I play with fasting in this area a little bit? Not necessarily from food if it's not my vice, but what else can I go without intentionally for a while, and maybe explore other areas of fulfillment and realize I'm doing pretty well without that damn thing?
Yeah, I think too. It's going to be. I think a lot of people probably wouldn't realize how impactful in a negative sense it is in their life until they get distance from it. So the hard part's probably going to be in your position, convincing people to take that first plunge and just don't do social media for 7 days and then see how you feel about it. And they're probably going to say, wow, that's exceptional. I noticed that too, like with the autoimmune diet. It's a hardcore diet. It requires to restrict things that people just assume are necessary. Like when I had to give up coffee, I remember raging about that to everybody I could talk to, raging about the fact that I couldn't drink coffee anymore because I was obsessed with it. And then when I finally did it, when I finally stopped fucking complaining and just stopped eating coffee, I felt great. It was inconceivable to me that you can't drink coffee, or that you can no longer eat gluten, or you can no longer eat rice, or you can no longer eat eggs or milk or whatever. But then once you break down that hurdle and gain that perspective, all of a sudden it opens up your mind. Well, God, what else could I do without? How else could I recreate my entire life? Because I didn't see that one little thing and how profound it could be. What if I'm doing some macro things that could change every day of the rest of my life just by reframing things a little bit? That's going to be fun in your position, working with people in that regard. Like I've used myself as a guinea pig, and that's been fun, but probably not nearly as impactful as doing that with other people and seeing them break through.
And yeah, it's like you said, self exploration, the best way to do it. And that's the end goal ultimately, is like teaching people, encouraging people, influencing people, whatever it might be, to really start exploring this stuff yourself safely, of course, physically, psychologically, what uncomfortable, but where are these domains of opportunity where you can insert control, some command over yourself. And I think are a great place to start. But it, in my writing with some of these challenges that I do, I really want to make them as accessible and easy as fucking possible starting out. So if it is social media, like, man, turn the phone off when you're at dinner. Try that for a week. Like these, if you can't do that, we have a problem. We have a serious problem. So whether it's time as a burden to entry for physical challenges, trying to make them as short as possible with modifications all the way down to barely having to move your body, but doing something a little bit uncomfortable as productive, to the device stuff. How do you just turn the technology off intentionally for a while and start decreasing that total time? I think the average now is like 12 hours a day, 10 to 12 hours. It's insanity. I don't know how that's possible. but you can dial that shit back, but no one can truly do it for you. And that, again, coming back to your writing, that's what I appreciate about it the most is you really help people question themselves rather than hand feeding here's your answer. The how is endless. And even if you have a million examples, find a way to converge a few of them to make it uniquely applicable to you. That what I use in every presentation I give is that Bruce Lee quote: absorb what is useful, discard what is not, and then add what is uniquely your own. Because that last part is the most important part. Don't do it because Sam Alaimo does it. I mean, that what you do to schedule out your day, it's fucking awesome. But it might not work for everybody. But think about that, sure. How can you uniquely apply that kind of mindset, that concept to your life, and then make it concrete for you? So you specifically make it work for whatever your values are and your system is. So it's fun to think about hows, but man, it's way better to wrestle with whys and then ask, what then? What am I going to do about it?
Yeah. I wonder, I don't know how that's going to work at scale. I mean, there's a reason why the how-to industry is so big. A lot of people, maybe they don't have the time, maybe they don't have the interest or the curiosity. They do just want to be told what to do. And they'll buy the how-to book that has a nice bullet point at the back and say, hey, you need to do these 7 things. And they'll go do them. But it is so much more interesting to know why. Why do I need to do those 7 things? What are those 7 things? Are they in fact bullshit and someone's just trying to sell me a book? Are they trying to make sure I don't get down to the root problem? Are there deeper questions I should be asking? The why is crucial and it's interesting. And like, we're here. Why? Why do we exist? Like, if you get down to the root of the whole thing, that could alleviate the need for any how-tos whatsoever and allow you a literally original path based on your childhood. Everybody's impacted by their childhood. That in itself is a fascinating can of worms. Like, why? Everybody should do like an exorcism of their childhood. Lean all the way into that shit and then make something of it. Like, how dictated am I by my childhood? What am I running away from? Am I running towards something that I didn't have? That's awesome. And instead of just trying to do a how-to band-aid, which might work for a lot of people, I'm not shit talking that in any way, shape, or form. A lot of people get a lot of value out of that. But a lot of people also use that to escape the responsibility of owning themselves. And to your point, seeing the different reactions between people, who wants to own it and who just says, I just tell me what to do, I don't care. You're dealing with the full spectrum of the like human possibilities here. And the people that like motivate me the most are the ones who just they are hungry. Like, once you mention there's something that might not know, you see it in their eyes. Their eyes get bright and they're like, oh wow, but there's such a thing as an autoimmune diet. Like, tell me more. Oh, this sucks. Okay, cool. Tell me more. I want to know more. How many days do I do it? All right, let's rock and roll. Let's do it. That's awesome because they want to break down those walls. They want to know and they want to understand and they want to suffer because they want to wake up a little bit more. Fasting was a really interesting one because in one sense, it's the hardest thing in the world. In the other sense, it's the easiest thing in the world. Not eating for 7 days sucks. It's going against every cell in your body that wants to eat. On the other hand, it's as simple as, do you have the discipline to control what you pick up and put into your mouth, or do you not? It's no more complicated than that. Do you have the ability to control your hand reaching for an apple and putting that apple in your mouth, or do you not? Yes or no? Everything else is bullshit. It is such a cool black and white yes or no 1 or 0 test that like you very quickly learn the character of yourself if you go through this, or the character of somebody else when you watch them try to go through it. Do you have that basic elementary command of your body and your hand in your mouth, or do you not? That's the beautiful part about fasting. And that's kind of brutal for a lot of people because they're going to say, well, go fuck yourself. But at the same time, it's a test. Did you do it or did you not?
And then what do you do with all that extra time? It's amazing when you go without eating and just drinking water, like how much time we spend between snacking, meals. You get a lot of time back in your day. And then you can do that with a productive attitude on top of that. You can see what you're capable of. But a funny story, just the other week, 24-hour water fast. And 4-year-old James having a hard time. And I was about like 10, 12 hours in the fast, dealing with him, knew the wife was stressed, shit was going on. I'm cleaning up the food. I went passive mode. I went subconscious mode, wasn't thinking. And before I knew it, I ate all the food off his plate without being aware of it. So I was in this stress state, operating passively, and I lost command of myself because I let James get to me. But so it just, it was like a perfect example of what you described. Is I've done this many times, but I mean, when you're stressed out and you lose your ability to stay rational and maintain self-command, you do things without even fucking thinking about it. And I ate the rest of his plate without even thinking. So I failed that self-command challenge that you just alluded to.
That's not really a fail. It's not really. It's just funny. It's not really a fail, but like the failure is tricking yourself out of doing the thing in the first place. It's coming up with a rationalization and saying, I didn't need to do it anyway. That was stupid. It's not for me. Oh, it's dangerous. There's a million ways to get out of it. The brain is so good at like getting out of doing these truly uncomfortable challenges, because we grew up with absolute surplus. The fact that the thing of not eating is the aberration nowadays, whereas back then we had to earn every single calorie we ate. We would burn the calories to consume the calories. It is such a mind trip, like reverting to this hardcore ancient thing of not eating food at all, that it's a worthwhile test in and of itself for those who are interested in doing that test. It very quickly shows you. It very quickly realizes it's just a perfect test of discipline. Yeah.
And the paradox of ancient civilizations attempting to earn what we have in abundance now, where now we are quote unquote thriving based on what we've attained as a civilization, but we can actually experience fulfillment by going backwards and withdrawing from the abundance into the hunger, into the cold, into the underslept, into the suffering categories, if you will, to explore yourself and how you operate there. One thing I would add, I appreciate you saying I didn't fail at the challenge. It makes me feel better. But when I did truly fail was the first time I did a 72-hour water fast. So, and that is because I did it, but I was a fucking dick the entire time. And like, not where I was like mean to my kids or my wife, but just shorter, just like buckling down, focusing on it, and just pretty shitty attitude overall. Just kind of got through it. And still showed up to coach jujitsu, but just got through class, didn't go hard, skipped a workout. But hey, I did my 72-hour water fast, checking the box. Maybe I could brag to people. Bad attitude, kind of shitty mood, and just not the same Kyle during that time. And my wife told me after, she was like, you could tell that was affecting you. You're a lot shorter than you usually are. And so I sat on that like, man, is that really what the kind of person I would be when I'm suffering? Like, oh, my character goes out the window, but I can accomplish this cool challenge. Everything I've done since that point, and that was several years ago, was, hey, if I'm doing the shitty attitude, you failed already. So you might as well like wrap it up, try again later. And just that orientation of my attitude, no matter how I'm feeling, no matter what's going on, I can still control that. And that can help get a win.
Yeah, I'm here for it, man. That's great.
Brother, I've had you on here for almost an hour and a half now. As you know, we've hung out several times. I can talk to you all night, and we actually might plan to do that one time where we ruck through the night and see if we can do like a 9-hour podcast from, I think you said 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. So we'll have some audio running through the night while we see how we can suffer well together. We'll see if we can make that a reality one day. But dude, every time I talk to you, every time I read your work, it's an absolute pleasure, and I get better because of it. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom today, and I look forward to the next time, brother.
All right, brother. Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care.
Remember, all the knowledge in the world means little unless you uniquely apply it to your life. Challenge yourself to take action. Knowledge applied is wisdom earned. Determine what is important to you and get after it with intention, effort, and consistency. Until next time, stay resilient, my friends.